What's up, guys, and welcome back to MoAn Inc. If you guys are new here, well then, hello. My name is Erica, and it is a pleasure to have you joining us today on the channel, because for today's video, as you can see from the title, we're going to be diving into Seven Against Thebes, a play by the Greek tragedian Aeschylus. Now, before we can get into that summary, please do not forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so that you know every single time I post in the future. And now that you have so kindly joined us in this little corner of the internet, let's get into today's video. Seven Against Thebes. Now, if you guys have not watched my context episode for Aeschylus, that will really help you guys who are tackling this play by yourself, simply because this play would have been one of a trilogy, and it's not the first in the trilogy, it would actually be the last in a trilogy. So there's a lot of backstory to Seven Against Thebes that is vital to know going into this, that obviously the audience would have known going into this. So definitely check that episode out if you need any of that backstory. Like if you don't know the backstory of Oedipus and Thebes and like that whole mythological family tree and timeline, that episode, the context episode, does offer a lot in that. Because today's video is just a summary of what is literally on the page of the play. The play opens with a large gathering of citizens on stage. And as the stage opens and as we see all of these citizens who are sort of chit-chatting and trying to figure out what's going on, we have Aeschylus, who is currently the leader. Again, there's backstory to that, but we don't have time for that. Aeschylus is the leader and he comes on stage with his attendants to address all of the citizens. And he says to them, "Everyone, I need you to get into a mindset of protecting your family, your land, your city, because trouble is a-brewing outside the gates." He tells us that he has heard from a seer that there is an imminent attack on Thebes, right? From just outside of the gates, we know that there will be an army that is approaching. He's heard that an army is approaching and that it will be a huge Argive attack, is how he describes it. And so he's really just trying to rally up the citizens to make sure that they're aware of what's going on, for them to go and get their armor on, because it is all hands on deck. Now, for those of you who don't know, the imminent attack is from his brother, Polynices. Again, backstory we can't really get into. Regardless though, as Aeschylus is on stage addressing everybody, we have a scout who runs on stage to update us in real time. Okay, because prior to this, as I just mentioned, a seer told Aeschylus what's going on. He trusts the seer, obviously, because the seer is in touch with the gods, and that's how the seer hears everything. But this is now a scout who has actually seen this army assembling, who has seen these people assembling, and is coming on stage to bring the news. When he addresses Aeschylus and the citizens, he stresses that he has seen with his own eyes that actually this army that is now getting ready to attack, they have already made their sacrifices. And therefore, this is coming fast. Okay, this attack is coming now. They've already made their sacrifices of a bull and sheeps and all of that sort of thing to Ares and to Enyo, right? So those are the two gods that are mentioned. So these guys are out for blood. The scout makes it incredibly clear that these guys are going to attack Thebes and they want to take the city, or they will die trying. So this is not the best news to hear. But he does leave with some positivity, where he relays to everybody that he will continue to have a reliable, watchful eye on what's going on outside, so therefore the news will not be delayed from what's going on with them to the Thebans themselves, right? So he has sort of given himself this role as being the guy that's going to run between them in order to keep everybody updated of what the hell they are doing outside the gates, because it's not good. And then he exits the stage. Aeschylus has one last moment of looking up to the gods and asking and praying for them to guard the city, right? He makes it very short, very sweet, not like this long, overdrawn thing. He very much is like, hey, I would appreciate it if you guys could watch over the city since you guys decide on fate. That would be great. Thank you very much. And then he literally exits the stage, and so does everybody else on stage. Now, when they all leave the stage, we then have the chorus suddenly file on stage. And the chorus in this play are a band of Theban women. Now, when they come on, they start their whole choral ode, which is long and lengthy. And to sum it up for you guys, they obviously sort of mention who they are. I say sort of because it's not really like, we are this, we are the chorus. But throughout the opening of their song, they sort of explain their role, which is that they're the women, you know, they have their husbands and their sons and all these people who are going to be affected by this. And so therefore, they have so much fear and so much anxiety about this that they spend the ode praying to, like, basically all the gods. I mean, this list is impressive. We have Poseidon mentioned, Zeus mentioned, Apollo mentioned, Apollo's mum Leto is mentioned, Artemis is mentioned, Athena's mentioned, and right at the end, Hera is mentioned, right? So literally all the gods are detailed of like, we're praying to you and this is what we want you to do. We would love for you to watch over the city and you, remember how you resided here, right? They make a huge, huge point of talking to Ares, being like, we know that they're praying for you, but remember how you liked Thebes. Remember how you like Cadmus's city, which is Thebes, for you guys who are reading it. And I should have mentioned this before, actually. When you see it says Cadmus's city, Cadmus is the founder of Thebes, right? So they do stress this to Ares, being like, remember how you dwelt here, remember how we treated you so well, all of this sort of stuff. And they really just address the all-powerful deities and ask for them to guard their sacred Thebes. Now, as they finish this, I'm laughing already, but as they finish this, we end up getting into this really weird conversation that actually does not stop for the whole play, okay? And I mean that because even though the scene technically changes and whatever, this common conversation continues the whole way through. And the conversation is that Eteocles enters the stage and he immediately, like the first line of his response, is calling the Theban women, the chorus of women, who are offering up their prayers and saying how fearful and their anxiety and all of this. He calls them intolerable things, because that's fun. But before Eteocles gets, well, okay, there's no other real way of saying this apart from really problematic, he does actually have a valid point, okay? I did kind of understand it, because he starts off being really rude, right? Calling them intolerable things. Thank you for dehumanizing them, that's lovely. He then says that he doesn't understand what they're doing because all of their prayers aren't actually going to help them, right? He's like, you've gone into huge detail, you've prayed to every single god. What is that actually going to do? As the chorus were giving their choral ode, part of that direction was that they were dropping to their knees in front of these gods' images, in front of, you know, little representations of them in order to pray to them. And that's really something that Eteocles picks on, right? Where he's just like, that's not actively doing anything. And that's why I'm here to tell you off, because I need you to actually be useful in this very stressful situation. And that is all, like every ounce of understanding I will give Eteocles, because from here we just go downhill really, really rapidly. In fact, he immediately responds by saying that this is why he will never share a house with anyone of the female race. Yeah, lovely guy to be around. He claims that due to the women's anxieties and their fears, it's made them unbearable. Like, what a way to just diminish, like, what? He actually blames them for making the rest of the citizens so anxious, right? And so nervous for this oncoming army, because he says that because they were running around due to their fears, due to their anxieties, and they're running this way and that, and they're calling out to the gods, and they're wailing, and they're being very scared and all of this. It's because of that the citizens are now scared, right? It has nothing to do with the army. The citizens were fine hearing about the army, apparently, and it's all because the women reacted to the news that Eteocles is like, actually, you're a fucking problem. What? Huh? He ends his lovely speech by saying that this is a reminder as to why men handle things outside of the home and women should only be inside. Because if they're inside, they cause no problems. I genuinely, from the bottom of my heart to whoever is watching this, I wish I was making this up. And you can only laugh because it is so unbelievable that these words are written. They're written down. I don't even know what to say. The chorus, rightfully so, do rebuttal him and say that it's because of the war that they're reacting this way, right? It isn't just like a random reaction. They're not just, filled with anxiety on the daily. They would never intentionally make anybody else feel fear or feel anxiety about a certain thing. And Eteocles retorts, I had to literally write this down because I wouldn't be able to, but it's in lines 209 to 210 of the text. And he says, has a helmsman ever found a way to safety by fleeing from the stern to the prow when his ship is foundering in high seas? Right, so that is his whole thing, that he basically is like, you gotta keep fucking calm, which I still think is a very weak argument, but alas, we move. Emotions are not allowed. How silly, Erica. Now, there is a very long back and forth between the chorus and Eteocles on this topic, where basically Eteocles is telling them, yeah, you can feel whatever you want to, you just can't react to it, basically. And the women are just kind of being like, well, you know, we kind of think this, and we felt this, and this is why we did this, it wasn't just random. Which launches Eteocles into a very long mansplaining, there's no other way of saying it. He decides that he's going to tell the women how they should pray and how they should channel their anxieties, which I would like to just remind people that for women to wail and to lament and do all of these sorts of things, that is a women's role. I get that they're being very loud and I get that this is a stressful situation, but Eteocles is handling it absolutely horrendously. And he tells them that what they should be doing is not falling at the knees of the gods and just asking for, you know, the gods to watch over them and the gods to be helpful. He's like, that doesn't work. This is how you pray. And he gives them an example of how to pray to the gods in order to get the best response from them, which in his head is that you pray to the gods and you're like, hello, insert deity here, right? Any god that you want to, watcher. Okay, just pick a god. I'm going to go for Ares, but Eteocles just kind of does a general one in the play. And he then says, hi, God, please watch over the city. And if you do this and if we're saved, we're going to then do X, Y, and Z. And his examples are they're going to make X amount of sacrifices. They're going to erect X amount of temples for this deity, blah, blah, blah. Right, so he's basically saying it has to be a barter or else your prayers to the gods are fucking useless to us. This whole conversation is so drawn out and so absurd just because it's like, again, women's roles were to do this and Eteocles is like, you're not doing it right though. And you as a woman, you can't read this play and not read it as like mansplaining, because we've seen women do a lot of this in Greek tragedy. And of course, like, yeah, the women are being very general and all of this, but like the way Eteocles is attacking them, it's a lot. It's just the back and forth is so misogynistic. It's so silly. Would highly recommend that you go read if you would like to anger yourself just a tad. Anyways, though, after Eteocles does this whole mansplaining thing, he ends up by saying that he is going to now pick the men that are going to be stationed by the gates, right? He's obviously going to station himself by one of the 7 gates of Thebes. Did I mention that? That's why it's called Seven Against Thebes as well. There are 7 gates of the city of Thebes in mythology, and so therefore he'll be at one and he's going to pick the other 6 men who are going to guard the gates and be the leaders of said army regiment behind the gate, waiting for the onslaught to come. After this announcement, he then exits the stage, which leaves the chorus by themselves. Now, even though throughout this conversation that Eteocles and the chorus had, I was on the side of the chorus, I gotta say that immediately Eteocles leaves and the chorus erupt into song and they pray up to Zeus and they ask Zeus to protect their city. But they basically do it in the exact same way that they were doing it before Eteocles interjected. So it is just kind of like one of those things where you're reading it going, I don't know if this is you intentionally being like, fuck that guy, we're going to do it exactly how we were doing it before because that tends to work. Or is this them hearing Eteocles and then literally just like not taking any note of what he said and being like, well, he said that we could still pray to the deities, so we're going to still do, like, there's no indication of either one, like they don't address it. I would like to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments if you guys are reading along. Do you think that this is the chorus intentionally ignoring Eteocles or just like not really having processed what Eteocles said? I would like to think it's the first one, obviously, but I don't know. Regardless of that, they sing a very long choral ode where they are just stressing the importance of Thebes. They're stressing how they need the gods on their side. Again, not offering anything to the gods in return for that, but it's a very, very long choral ode where they are stressing the beauty of Thebes, why Thebes should stay standing, why they need the gods to protect them in this way at this particular moment. And as they're singing, as they're coming up to the end of the choral ode, we can see, and they stress that they can see, the scout that is showing back up onto stage to bring them more news. So the scout comes on stage from one side and Eteocles comes on from the other, and they meet in the middle to chat yet again. The scout's news this time is that he has more detail of who on the other side has been stationed at each gate. So again, I had to write this down because as he's saying all of this, Eteocles then matches up their own warriors and their own really good leaders to battle each individual guy that is going to be attacking from the outside looking in. Okay, so there was no way I was going to remember all of these names. But lucky for you guys, I did make a note of all of them. So I won't be specifying the gate, by the way. I'm just going to say gate 1, gate 2, gate 3, gate 4. Again, I always have to make sure that you guys have a reason to go back to the text. These videos are not to substitute reading the text whatsoever. So if you need that detail, do go over to Aeschylus. I have a link, by the way, in the description below for the play online for free, if you guys want to go and check that out. However, let's get into the people who are at the gates and who will be battling against one another. We hear that the first gate will be approached by the hero Tydeus. And in response to that, we have Eteocles put up Melanippus. That sounds like I'm saying platypus, but I don't actually know how to pronounce that name. Obviously, the name is on the screen for you guys who are listening, so you guys can check that out. Just look up, just every so often, because I do put words up on the screen. So we have Tydeus against Melanippus, and then we have a guy called Capanius, depending on where you stress that. I unfortunately did not write down the Greek name, so I could know where the stress is. Why would I do that? That makes no sense, past Erica. Regardless, Capanius, whatever his name is, he will be stationed against the second gate. And against him, Eteocles decides to pit this guy called Polyphontes, right? So he will be the Theban who is fighting against that guy. And the chorus, by the way, just so that you guys know, after each of these pairings are made, they chime in to wish them luck, right? So every time Eteocles rebuttals against the scout says the name, Aeschylus says, great, we're going to pair this person with them. The chorus will then chime in to say, and we wish them luck, and we hope everything will go well, and that the gods will be on their side. That kind of a thing. Gate number 3 is slightly confusing, because that hero on the opposite side is called Eteoclus, not Eteocles. I always mention this when you guys watch my summaries. Some of these names are oddly similar. This is unfortunately one of them. Okay, so Eteoclus is going to be gate 3, and against that, Eteocles, right, the guy who's in Thebes, he sends someone called Megarius to battle against him. Apparently they're very well suited towards one another. There's lots of detail in the text about why these two would fight really well against one another. So again, you guys can go and check that out as you're listening to this. Fourth gate will be attacked by a guy called Hopamedon, and Eteocles is going to match him with somebody called Hyperbius. Fifth gate will be attacked by Parthenopeus. Well, that's a fucking name and a half. So he's going to be opposite the fifth gate, and he's apparently like super incredible warrior, and so therefore Eteocles matches him up with a guy called Actor, like spelt like how we would say an actor. So that's his name. He goes against that guy. The sixth gate will be Amphiaraus. I really should have practiced all of these names off camera. But Eteocles matches him up with a guy called Lasthenes, who is the last one, because then obviously we have the seventh gate, which will be attacked by Polynices, who is Eteocles' brother. And so therefore Eteocles will go and meet him at the seventh gate in order to sort this whole thing out. Obviously, when Eteocles pairs himself up with his brother, the chorus interjects and actually don't do their whole, oh, we wish him well and blah, blah, after the announcement. And instead they ask him why he is so keen to fight his brother. To which Eteocles replies, and this is an exact quote from the play, that he answers and says, since the gods have hastened the deed so urgently, let the whole race of Laius, just sort of backpedaling from the quote for a hot second, Laius is Oedipus's father, and Oedipus is Eteocles and Polynices' father, brother. It's very complicated. It's very fucked up, but that's who Laius is, right? So he is Oedipus's rightful father. So anyways, Laius, hated by Phoebus, so hated by Apollo, be swept on the wind to the destined flood. Now, what's interesting about this is the chorus keep rebuttaling him to basically stress that, you're fighting your brother, that's not right, kind of a thing. And Eteocles keeps stressing this curse in his household that he is also subject to, right? And so he basically, at the end of it, again, another direct quote from the actual Greek, because I didn't get the English translation of this because it was quite odd in my opinion. So I had to go back to the Greek and see what it actually says. And the final line of how he explains that there's this curse against their family and how he's really just playing into this because he has to fight his brother. It's not really the same as fighting your brother in a normal family that doesn't have your dad also kind of be your brother and your mum also be your grandma. It's very, very weird. So the literal Greek is translated to that Aeschylus says that there is a gain coming before death that comes later, right? So that kind of means that like the curse, oh God, I'm going to get really technical. The curse is kind of whispering to him as he makes these decisions. And so he claims that he's got to slay him and then be slain himself, right? So you've got to slay somebody in order for then you to come crumbling underneath this curse, right? So he basically knows that he's doomed. The Greek is very weird and finicky. I say weird and finicky as not somebody that is an expert in ancient Greek at all, but that's what it says. And that's his reasoning for it. So it's not very bright, to say the least. The chorus and Aeschylus do have a back and forth where the chorus continue to fight him on his decision because any kind of fratricide is not ideal, right? The gods don't like it and they keep trying to stress this, and Aeschylus basically just keeps telling them to shut up until he eventually leaves the stage. And then we fall into yet another choral ode. Now again, it starts with the anxieties, it starts with the stress because now all of the men, as they tell us, they are now going to take their positions on each of the gates, right? As we've heard, these individual men and now their armies, they have shown up at the gates and the chorus are telling us that that's now why they're stressed because now the battle is here. But what's really interesting about their choral ode is that they go through why this curse exists on the family and exists on Thebes themselves. And this, for any of you guys who did not know the backstory of Oedipus, we do have a very mini summary right here in this choral ode. They stress that Laius was actually once upon a time, he heard from the oracle, from Apollo's oracle, that he would save the city in the future because he was the king and he would save the city if he did not have any children. However, if he did, then he would be fathering his own death. Right now, this was told to him multiple times. It was stressed so much to him in multiple different avenues, not just from the oracle, right? We hear that even though this prophecy was relayed to him, he heard it all over the place and he actively chose to ignore it. They walk us through this whole story of Oedipus up until how, well, what the audience would have just seen, presumably, if the play survived, which is that Oedipus then, with the same hand that he killed his father unknowingly, right back in his story, this is going to sound really weird to people who do not know the myth of Oedipus, but we hear that with the same hand that he slayed his father once upon a time, once he came to the realization that he had married his mother, that all of these children, it's really icky, honestly. With that same hand, he then ended up stabbing out his own eyes, right? So we get a whole update of the Oedipus myth for any of you guys who didn't know it. This is just the chorus's way of keeping us up to date as the fighting is actually happening off stage. When we get to the end of this very, very long ode, this very long explanation, and all of the anxieties again coming to the surface that the chorus are telling us, a messenger then runs on stage. And this messenger tells us that the city has escaped slavery, which means that they have won, right? Because obviously, if the enemy had won, everybody within the city would have become slaves to a new ruler. They would not have had any choice, all this sort of stuff. So he makes this really wonderful announcement where he says that they have now all escaped slavery, and they've all escaped this eternal doom that they would have faced. In another long back and forth between the chorus and this time the messenger, we hear of how at 6 of the 7 gates of Thebes, things went really well, right? So the Theban heroes from inside, they have been victorious over the people outside, except at the 7th gate. And what we hear that happened at the 7th gate between the sons of Oedipus is that they simultaneously killed one another. Again, sounds really weird, works really well for the mythology though, and works for the mythology that has to continue with the story, so I swear that this will make more sense. The messenger tells us that because the 2 sons of Oedipus killed one another, their bodies are currently being brought into the city for people to basically figure out what they're going to do, right? Because we have Aeschylus, who is ruling Thebes, his brother, who was outside and attacked Thebes, both of them now being brought in because Oedipus once upon a time was the king, Oedipus's father, but also technically it's, again, a messed up family. He was the king, right? So this is a very important family. And as they're talking and as the chorus are trying to work through this themselves, because they have a lot of issues, we hear from their choral ode, in what they're supposed to do. Because they don't know if they should be celebrating that obviously the Thebans and the city itself is saved, or if they should be mourning their kings, because technically both Polynices and Eteocles, they were sharing the throne, right? As this was all happening, that sort of is what amounts to this whole problem. They were sharing the throne, and so they don't know, the chorus don't know what they're supposed to do. They also don't know if they should feel happy because the curse has now come to fulfillment, right? Because they're just kind of like, well, if that's now happened, shouldn't we celebrate that now it's ended, hopefully, that we don't have to deal with any of this malarkey anymore, any of this like weird uncoverings now because there was a plague and there's all this, and they're singing about all of this, basically really struggling internally of how they're supposed to react. And as we see them doing that, we then see the bodies of the brothers being brought on stage. So they both come on, and we have the two sisters, who are Antigone and Ismene, come on stage as well. When Antigone and Ismene come on stage, they actually take up the song and they start singing. Actually, I have a lot of quotes here because I wanted to kind of get you guys into what it would have sounded like. Obviously, I will not be singing. Let's get that straight. But I wanted to read you guys kind of what it sounds like, because obviously both of their brothers come on. We have Ismene, who stands next to Eteocles, and we have Antigone, who stands next to Polynices. And when the chorus kind of die off about their anxieties and about what they're supposed to do, the sisters pick up. And we have things like Antigone says a very short line, which is, "You were struck as you struck," to which Ismene then replies and says, "You died as you killed." Antigone then says, "By the spear you killed." And Ismene says, "By the spear you died." Right? So that's kind of how this song sounds, that it's a statement and then an echo and a statement and then an echo. And it is really tragic, right? It is beautiful. Like, I can only imagine what it would have been like on stage. And you really feel the sisters' sorrow and the sisters' pain for their brothers as they stand there looking at them and identify that, they were, stabbed on their left side, how they were attacked, now that they're both dead. It's really, really tragic. And when the girls kind of, they don't end their song because they continue it in a little bit, but when they kind of come to an end of this sort of back and forth of the statement and the echo, the chorus then pick up again to kind of sing us out of the scene, right? And they're sort of talking about how the gods are this mighty force and all of that sort of jazz to really elevate the tragic element of this. Because remember, it is a tragedy. I know I've been laughing the whole time because it's inevitable. I like to find silly things and everything, but this is a tragedy. And this is really that moment where you really start to see how these deaths have affected, right, the family, and how they have affected the women and how they will affect the city. When this tragic song comes to an end, we have the messenger step onto stage. And the messenger comes on to tell the characters, but also the audience, what the citizens of Thebes have decided for the two brothers. Now, when he starts speaking, he accentuates that Polynices, who's the brother that attacked Thebes, and Eteocles, who is the brother that stayed in Thebes, they're going to be treated very differently in death. Right, so on stage are just the bodies, and he announces that the citizens want Eteocles to be honored. Right, so he's going to get the correct burial rites, he's going to have the mourners, he's going to be, there's going to be sacrifices made, all of this sort of stuff that you guys who frequent the channel will know is the norm for when somebody dies, right? This is the right that they have, this is what they should do, this is how you pass over to the underworld, right? So he says that Eteocles will have all of that. However, Polynices, because he is now being deemed as this traitor, his body will actually be dragged and left outside the city and must remain unburied. And not only will he remain unburied, but he will then be eaten by the dogs and the birds and whatever animals are outside the city. They are going to feast on his body, and so he will not get the correct burial rites. Hearing this, Antigone is obviously having none of this. Now, the very long back and forth between her and this messenger that I'm just going to summarize for you guys, because I presume a lot of you know the Sophocles play. Presume you might not all go into that on the channel as well, so don't worry. But Antigone has absolutely none of this because she starts realizing that she's in the position, as a woman, that she should be giving both of her brothers, right? Not only as a woman, but also as a sister, as a member of this family. She should be giving both of them the correct burial rites. And so she argues with this messenger and she says, that's great. You don't have to do whatever it is that you want to do, but I will at least bury my brother, even if it's outside the city, right? He doesn't have to be buried in. That's completely fine. I will go outside the city, I will give him the correct burial rites, and I will make sure that he passes over as he should do. And as you can imagine, the messenger, like, not happy about this at all. In fact, the messenger is like, what the fuck are you on? That's not what we decided. That's not what just came out of my mouth. This is not actually up for debate. Why would we think, based on the way that Aeschylus started this play, that it would end in any other way than just a guy telling a woman to shut the fuck up? Right? Anyways, though, it's a lot of really iconic moments in this conversation between them, because we have, not only the chorus, but also the messenger basically saying that people are going to outcast Antigone, that she is going to actually be up against a really hard audience if she decides to do this. And Antigone essentially tells them that she's going to do whatever the fuck she wants. And people can try and be mean to her. People can try and tell her off. But she's not budging on this topic whatsoever. This is what she has to do, and this is what she will do. And this ends up bothering the messenger so much that by the end of it, he just goes, fine. Do whatever you want to. I don't move my standpoint. I still forbid it. The people forbid it. And if you do it, you will then have to deal with the consequences of your actions. And with that, he exits the stage. In true tragedy fashion, the way we end the play is by the chorus singing us out. And in fact, they leave us on a really lovely note, I think, anyways, when they talk about grief. And they sing about grief and how people process grief, the city processing the grief that's, currently around them, Antigone and Ismene processing the grief. And something that they end on, like literally one of the last lines, is them saying that grief over time does alleviate and that time does heal those wounds. And so in time, hopefully, the city will heal not only from Aeschylus' death, not only from this tragedy, but also from Polynices' death, right? They acknowledge both of them will take a toll on everybody involved, on every citizen, on every family member, and they stress that time is the most important thing. And then everybody exits, and that's the end of the play. So again, another really rogue play. I know a lot of people don't read that, but for you guys who don't know, this now sets us up really nicely for Sophocles' Antigone, which essentially, when he writes about Oedipus, he does have his Oedipus plays, and Antigone is basically picked up right off the end of this, right? So we have Antigone in that play who's arguing against Ismene, and she will ultimately, for you guys who don't know, she will bury Polynices and have to deal with those consequences over in that play by that tragedian. So all of this does link up between the playwrights. All of these stories do link up. They are slightly different in each and every one, but that's essentially where Aeschylus has left us with Seven Against Thebes. If you guys enjoyed this video though, because I know that this play isn't typically on anybody's syllabus, it isn't typically on any school or university syllabus unless you're going to get into like really niche like comparative playwriting or literature or anything like that. So if you guys have read this and you guys have watched this video and are enjoying these more like oddball plays that we're summarizing, we're bringing up, do let me know by smashing that like button. Which corner is that in? Whichever one. Go and hit the like button so that I can see how many of you guys are enjoying this, because it means that when I get into other playwrights, I will always go into the little niche plays if you guys like it. And if not, then of course, we're not going to do niche plays anymore. And we'll just stick to the really popular plays that you guys need for school or you need for the plays that everybody has read, basically. We'll stick to those with other playwrights. I'm testing it all out with Aeschylus. Let me know by liking the video. And of course, a huge thank you to you guys who have subscribed, who have been along for the ride, and who have watched this video and this whole playlist. It means the world to me. So thank you so much, and we'll be seeing you next time with more videos here on MoAn Inc. I'll see you guys then.